Hello and welcome to the Voice of TOD. I'm Tom, and in this video I'm going to give you my thoughts on episode 8 of The Mandalorian Season 3. This one is called The Return, and is the final episode of this extremely messy season. So, quick face value review. On the surface, I enjoyed this episode, and couple it with last week's penultimate episode, they work very well as a two-parter. Dive a little deeper, and there are problems, like with the rest of this season, but they are solid enough couple of episodes of sci-fi, well, science fantasy, let's say, and they really do give you that Star Wars hit straight into your veins. Just to get them out of the way, the music is exceptional again, as expected, and the CGI is ropey again, as expected, especially from a Disney TV show at this point. The volume is a great proof of concept for filming some things, but I don't think action works well on it, and it needs a rethink for wider ranging applications, and that's, I think, why the CGI looks dodgy. But, that said, let's dive in a little deeper, shall we? We're going to go through this with a finer view. There will be spoilers from here on out, so that's your first and only warning. We open straight into the action as Bo leads a handful of survivors through the caves. Looks like this retreat has cost a lot of lives. We get a little bit of an update between her and Axe, who is about to break Atmo, and she tells him Moff Gideon is back and orders all Mandos onto the planet to make their last stand. One thing that stood out to me is that Axe clearly has a lot more fuel in his jetpack than a normal Mandalorian. Then, we get an update on Din. Honestly, I thought he was going to do nothing this episode. But he frees himself. Well, almost. It's probably one of the better fight sequences in this episode actually, and he takes down 1.5 of the 2 guards who are holding him captive. Somehow, as if by magic, Mech Grogu finishes off the other one. I have no idea where the little ball sack comes from, or how he got there, but like I said earlier, don't think too hard. So, Din contacts Bo, but she's too far away from him and little ball sack, so he's on his own basically. Bo doesn't even acknowledge that Ballsack, who escaped with her, if you watched last week's episode, has disappeared. It's like he didn't exist in her mind. Then we get the TIE interceptors launching. It feels like the order was given quite a long time ago and they're quite slow on the uptick, but it is a cool shot. I think Andor did it better, but it still looks great and it carries a lot of menace. So I'm all for it. We're then back to standard plot contrivances as Moff Gideon is somehow tracking Din and little Ballsack. Don't think too hard. And he decides to deal with them himself. I mean, he needs something to do, right? And again, out of nowhere, R5 is somehow on this planet. I thought he'd stayed on the gauntlet and gone back with the armourer in the last episode. But no, he was hiding behind a rock, near the base. I'm pretty sure he wasn't on the land ship either, so I don't know how he got there, but don't think too hard. Basically, the contrivance is that Din needs R5 to drop into the base, hack the computer system, and send him a map. So, R5 drops in, has a cowardly little droid moment before getting Din the map that he needs. Still, it is actually a very Star Wars thing to have droids hacking in an enemy base while you're trying to escape or kill everyone. I don't really have issues with it outside of why R5 is there, but you need it to push the story on, so yeah. Just so you don't forget about the fleet, we rejoin Axe as he drops in from, breaking atmosphere. These Beskar suits are pretty sturdy, I have to say, but he sort of lands through the ship's shields and it's almost like a perfect landing. Goes charging through the ship. He is speaking to them in the comm as well, but he orders every Mandalorian off the light cruisers and the main fleet into the gauntlets, so the gauntlets hang around just long enough for everybody to hot drop evac out of the cruiser, and then the gauntlets drop planet side. It's a cool looking shot. Like, don't think, this is why I call it science fantasy, because in reality it's impossible. Even in a spacesuit, what they're doing is probably impossible. But we know that gravity isn't really a thing in Star Wars. Neither is a lot of physics. It works. It's a cool looking shot. Mandalorians are cool. Don't think too hard. But it does look cool. And then you get the gauntlets dropping down the atmosphere, and then a couple of seconds, and the TIEs burst through the clouds. It's really well done. I actually do like the shots of the fleet. Like, through this entire season, the best CGI has been the shots of the fleet either on the ground, or especially when they're moving around just in like upper atmosphere of planets or through space, the dogfights. All that stuff has been amazing. And these there's interceptors and bombers, but they're not messing around. They just open up on the light cruiser, with Axe being the only one still in it. It doesn't look good. Visually it looks great, but it doesn't look good for him. Anyway, we cut back to Din, and it's the path to the boss battle, because that's what this show has been reduced to. But instead of the classic Dark Souls grey mist gate, it's the really cool red laser gates that we saw in the last episode. So, just so you know where he is. There's, I think, there's like 5 gates, but there's 3 lots of 2 commandos stationed between them. This is a really cool sequence. This is probably the second best fight sequence in this episode for me. There is a glaring problem before we start though. Basically, the plan is R5 is going to deactivate each gate one at a time when Din tells him, and Din's going to deal with the 2. You know, the 2 and then the 2 and then the 2, just to make it easier for him. But despite taking out his 2 captors, with them having weapons, Din, who picks up an Imperial jetpack off one of the bodies of the 2 guards, turns to little ballsack and says, "I don't have a weapon, this might get messy." The commandos he defeated had loads of weapons on them. They had blasters, they had flamethrower gauntlets, they had vibro knives. Why didn't he pick one up? He takes a jetpack, why not think, oh, I've lost my gauntlets, I'll just take a flamethrower module, and a blaster, oh, maybe another blaster, maybe a knife. Yet again, this show is making its alleged main character look like a pillock. But as he works his way down the hall, it is brutally efficient. And, you know, he looks cool doing it. Feels very like Hunger Games or Fortnite, where you're upgrading your weapon each time you beat someone. But this writing is just a joke at this point. It's so sad that the show has been reduced to this. Anyway, R5 drops the shields one at a time, and Din works his way through, and it all looks great. And I'm pointing fun at it, but it does look good. But then we have the traditional, can't do the last thing that you want me to do because something's stopping the droid trying to do it. This time, there's a mouse droid that finds R5, so he can't lower the gate. I also didn't know that mouse droids had sirens on the top. They didn't really do anything, because loads of mouse droids came at R5 and he just shocked one of them and then used his jetpack boosters to fly off after dropping the gate. I know it's very Star Wars and it feels very Star Wars, but basically it's R2-D2 versus the battle droids in Revenge of the Sith. It's that level. Move on. Next up, on the long walk to the boss fight, it's the cloning room. Now, this is actually quite a nice twist, but the clones are actually Moff Gideon. But it doesn't matter, because they find out who it is. One opens its eyes, it freaks Grogu out, and then Din blows them all up. No more clones. Flashback to Bo, and after escaping with the handful of survivors, I think there's less than 10 at this point, they go to some underground caves where the survivors used to hide out at times. But it's okay, because the armourer and all the gauntlets have just dropped in, and they're dropping all of the Mando troops, and then Bo and the survivors fly off to join them. It's a really cool scene. They all join up, there's maybe like 50 or 60 Mandos, jetpacks burning towards the base, weapons ready, Bo ignites the Darksaber. It's ropey CGI, but it's still a really cool shot. And for a simplistic point of view, it works. And then the battle kicks off because the good Mandos and then the bad Mandos, well, the Imperial Commandos, but you know, they're basically the same thing. We've descended into the heroes and the enemy have the same technology and they're just fighting it out like a Marvel movie. But they're like ropey CGI style flying around, cutting, you know, bows cutting at them with a darksaber, the blasters going everywhere, and it's cool, but I noticed on a second watch that some of the sequences in the initial one are just repeats. I think the same sequence is used twice for two different characters. Takes the coolness out of it, guys. I get it, budgetary issues, but, you know, this is the big grand finale. Come on. Anyway, back to Bo. Do we care? Not Bo, Din. He finally catches up with Gideon. Gideon goes into his evil monologue about how he was trying to perfect himself and he needed Grogu to give him Jedi powers so he could be a Jedi, and wouldn't he be a Sith? Why does he even want to be? Why does he even know about them? Like, there's so much about this character that has been used to set up the return of Palpatine that is then twisted round to he just wanted to be able to use the Force. But why? It doesn't matter, it's boss fight time. Now, we saw last week that Gideon has his own suit of Beskar armor, and it's a nice suit, black with horns. Don't really get why it's horns, doesn't really link into anything. But it's also power assisted. He's basically taken the Dark Trooper idea and made a suit of armor from it in Beskar. So he's basically Din, but better. The Marvel movie enemy fight thing. The whole sequence reminds me of Iron Man 1. I mean, that's another Jon Favreau project, so he can rip off himself, right? I don't know. Actually, they also, while all that's going on the little landing pad with Gideon just throwing Din around, the jetpack fight is going on in the background, and it actually looks like Iron Man 2 with the drones. Favreau needs some new ideas, man. Anyway, Gideon is like super powered, better, faster, smarter than Din, and he's just, yeah, like neither of them are really taking any damage, but Gideon's better. And he obviously gets bored because the Praetorian Guard show up, and then the three of them just start kicking the crap out of Din very quickly, probably as quickly as they did with Paz. They don't kill him though, because little ballsack comes running in his mech suit, spamming the no button for the second time this episode. So they turn on him. And as so stupid. As the three of the Praetorian Guard just close in on Grogu's mech suit and the blast door comes down, Din gets up and goes to sort of run and help him. Moff Gideon shoots him in the back with a missile, which does no damage apart from make him fall on his face, and then uses the grappling hook from his gauntlet to wrap it around Din's neck and pull him back. So he can't get to Grogu, but he's just been hit in the back with a missile that we know, if it's like the singing bird or whatever it is, the missiles he had in season 1 that completely took out stormtroopers, it did him no damage. Anyway, the Praetorian Guard break the mech suit, and Grogu is just dodgily jumping around the lights in the command center, going round in a circle. It's a puppet, and I appreciate the use of physical effects. It still looks a bit weird. But, you know, what else is Grogu going to do? Because he's been pretty useless most of this season. Anyway, thankfully for Din, Bo turns up with a darksaber, and now the fight splits off a bit. So it's Bo v Gideon, the final showdown, and Din versus 3 Praetorian Guard, while little ballsack uses the Force to move them around and push them over and stuff. It's not my favourite sequence. The choreography actually looked a bit ropey during both fights. Din is actually pretty brutal though. He knifes one of them up under the helmet, Another one, he like just blasts her up against the chin and pulls the trigger. And don't know what happened to the third one. Grogu probably force unconsciousnessed it. I don't know. Don't think about it too hard. But, you know, final boss fight. Then we get an update with Axe. The light cruiser is, like, they don't blow it up. They just shoot a lot of it until it's all on fire, and then they let it fall planet side. But it's basically buggered. And it's plunging towards the planet, so Axe calls Bo and he's like, hey, so the light cruiser's knackered. I'm gonna crash it into the base. And then he shoots the window out and flies out. So Axe survives. The ship is just barreling down on the base in flames, like about to explode. The only thing that popped into my head was, where are all the TIE fighters? Well, interceptors. Did they just disappear? It sort of looks like the writers forgot about them, but don't think about it too hard. Another nice little twist, actually, and I did appreciate this. While Gideon is beating up on Bo, he grabs her hand as she swings the darksaber to him and squeezes it. I mean, it would crush every bone in her body because it also destroys the darksaber. Oh well, it was cool to see it in live action. He then pulls off her helmet, and that's like, she's broken the creed now. She's been unmasked by an enemy, but we won't talk about that. And he's basically about to kill her. And then Din and Little Ballsack show up and save the day. It feels a bit rushed. But the cruiser comes and crashes through the base exactly where they are. And this massive fireball engulfs Gideon and Bo, Din and Ballsack. But it's fine, because Grogu uses, or Ballsack uses, the Force to put a shield around them, and as the fire dies down, he's kept them safe. It is a nice little ending. It reminded me, here we go again with it reminded me of when Groot does the cocoon thing in Guardians 1. Yeah, I mean, okay, we know that Grogu, I should use his proper name, shouldn't I? We know that Grogu is strong with the Force. We've already figured that out. His application of it is a little limited, but if you're gonna save the heroes from an impending fiery death, he's the guy that you want by your side, really, isn't he? Yeah, that's it. Our heroes have survived. Mandalore is reclaimed. And it's epilogue time. Quite a long epilogue, actually. The armor baptizes Paz's son, but there's no mention of Paz. Din adopts Grogu, so Grogu is now called Din Grogu. And then while that's going on, Grogu is like connecting to the Mythosaur because they're in the living waters of Mandalore, and we just see like the Mythosaur acknowledge Grogu or something. I don't know. Genuinely don't know. The forges are relit and it's a happy ending. The Mandalorians have reclaimed their husk of a planet. They don't keep peace for that long though, because we know they don't help out against the First Order, which happens in about 25 years' time. The sequel trilogy is coming. Where are the Mandalorians? That's all I'm saying. Then, because Din has fostered, basically, Grogu, he's officially adopted him because nobody knows where his parents are or anything, so he's now Din's son. The armor's like, oh, well, too bad, you've got to leave Mandalore now because he's your apprentice, you've got to go on side quests. So they head off to the rebel base, and Din asks Teva for a job because he can't go bounty hunting while he has Grogu with him. Basically, I think this is setting up Rangers of the New Republic that was announced and then cancelled. Probably to be announced again, who knows? But they're going to have it with Din instead of Cara Dune because we're not allowed to have nice things. And as payment, Din asks for the IG droid head that was above the bar. And then we close, finally, on Navarro, with Karga giving Din his own cottage, like was promised in episode 1. The IG head is used to remake IG-11, who becomes the Marshal of Navarro. Do we even care? Obviously they're doing that because you can't have Cara Dune. And again, don't ask how they got the body out of the ruins of the Imperial base, because everything exploded and it was all fiery death. Don't think too hard about it. But we do get a nice little shot of the clothes. A helmeted Din sat outside the cottage with little Ballsack lifting the frog things out of ponds with the Force. Look, don't get me wrong, I am happy that they didn't kill off Din in this episode. I thought that it was certain that he was going to be killed. But this ending doesn't feel well thought out, yet it also feels somehow quite final. This season has been a massive letdown. Don't get me wrong, I have enjoyed some parts of it. And the last 2 episodes are pretty solid Saturday morning cartoon space fantasy stories. And I suppose that's maybe how you do Star Wars for the small screen. But I wanted much more substance with all the flash that this gives you. You can thank Andor for that. Andor has ruined Disney Star Wars for me because Andor is so good. Everything else is just... at this point. Look, there's clearly been issues with this season. The plot is cigarette paper thin, at best, and Din has basically been kicked to the curb for most of it. It felt very contrived at times, and sadly that old sequel trilogy shadow looms so large over everything Star Wars right now. I'm pretty sure we'll see Grogu again at some point in the future, but it does feel like Din's story could end here and nobody would question it. Such a shame, because this could have been an amazing show with a very adult take on Star Wars and the underbelly of the galaxy. But it's ended up an inconsistent mess where nothing really matters anyway, because the ghost of Christmas Palpatine is going to show up and get killed by his granddaughter, the greatest Jedi ever. None of these sacrifices will mean anything. For me, they've ruined Din this season, just so they can throw him on the pile of has-beens with Boba, Luke and Han, so that Disney can continue to slowly bleed Star Wars dry. That said, I like to end these on a positive, and I'm really looking forward to Andor Season 2. And honestly, that Ahsoka trailer did look fantastic. I enjoyed Rebels, so hopefully Ahsoka is going to deliver on what it promises. But who knows, this is Disney Star Wars. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the Voice of TOD for more. And if you want some gaming content, go check out TOD Plays Games. It's all linked in the description, and you're always welcome over there. As always, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.